Hello, students, and welcome. In today's session, we're going to do a quick and clear revision of your civics chapter, Constitutional Design. By the time we're done, I'm sure you'll have a really good grasp of all the key ideas, and you'll feel much more confident for your exams. So before we dive in, let's think about a very basic question. Why does a country even need rules to run properly? Especially a country as large and as diverse as ours. Well, that's really what this whole chapter is about, finding the answer to that question. To get a good grip on this, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the powerful story of South Africa, which really shows us why a constitution is so necessary. Then, we'll talk about what a constitution actually does. After that, we'll see how our own country, India, created its constitution and what its guiding values are. And finally, we'll wrap up with a quick revision of key facts for your exams. Okay, let's begin with our first section. To really understand why a constitution is so vital, there's no better example than the story of South Africa. It's a really powerful case study that helps us see why it's so important. So, for many years, South Africa was under a very cruel system called apartheid. Now, what was this? It was an official government policy of racial discrimination. The white government there divided people based on their skin color. The black majority, who were the original inhabitants of the country, were treated very badly. Just imagine, there were separate trains, buses, hospitals, even beaches for whites and blacks. It was an extremely oppressive system. Now, the fight against this was a long and very difficult struggle. It was led by the African National Congress, the ANC. One of its main leaders was Nelson Mandela, who was put in jail for life in 1964. He spent 28 long years in prison. He was finally released in 1990, and this event changed everything. It led to a historic day, April 26, 1994, when South Africa finally became a democracy, and people of all races formed a government together. The idea behind this new South Africa is captured perfectly in this famous quote from Nelson Mandela. He said, "I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination." This is such a crucial point, you see. His goal wasn't about getting revenge on the whites. Instead, his dream was to build a society where everyone was equal and free. And what followed was nothing short of a miracle. The very people who had been enemies for so long, the oppressed and the oppressors, they actually sat down together to frame a new constitution. Can you believe it? Their main goal was to build trust and make sure that the terrible past was never repeated. This is how they created their beautiful rainbow nation with a constitution that promises equality and justice for all. Okay, so the story of South Africa really shows us why they needed a constitution, right? It was absolutely essential. Now, let's broaden our view a bit and understand what a constitution does in any country. Okay, this is a very important definition, something you should definitely remember for your exams. So, what is a constitution? Simply put, it is the supreme law of a country. Think of it as a rule book, a set of written rules that everyone in the country agrees to follow. It's the highest law of the land. So what is the job of a constitution? Well, it has four main functions. First, it creates trust and coordination. It gives rules that allow different kinds of people to live together peacefully. Second, it explains how the government will be formed and what powers it will have. Third, and this is very important, it puts limits on the government's power and protects the rights of us, the citizens. And fourth, it expresses the hopes of the people for building a good society. These 4 points are the perfect answer to the question, why do we need a constitution? Okay, so now that we know what a constitution does, let's bring it home. Let's talk about the making of our very own Indian constitution. You know, just like South Africa, the path to our constitution wasn't easy at all. The challenges were immense. We were and are a huge country with so much diversity. Our country was born out of the painful partition, a very traumatic event. Then there was the huge task of convincing more than 500 princely states to join India. So the makers of our constitution were naturally very worried about the country's future. But even with all these difficulties, our leaders did a fantastic job. Now these dates are super important, so let's walk through this timeline together. The idea of a constitution for India was discussed as far back as 1928, but the real work started in 1946 with elections to the Constituent Assembly. Their first meeting was in December 1946. After years of hard work, the Constitution was adopted on November 26, 1949, and finally it came into effect on January 26, 1950, which we celebrate as our Republic Day. So who were the people behind this massive task? It was the Constituent Assembly. It had 299 members from all parts of India. The chairman of the drafting committee, which did the main work of writing, was Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. He played a very, very important role. They worked for almost 3 years, and every single rule was discussed and debated openly. It was a truly democratic process. All right, this brings us to the very heart. You could say the soul of our Constitution, and the best way to understand its philosophy is by looking at the preamble, which is the introduction to our Constitution. The preamble begins with the words, "We the people of India." This means the power comes from the people. Now, let's take a look at these important words one by one. Sovereign means India is an independent country. Socialist means society should work to reduce the gap between rich and poor. Secular means that in India there is no official religion, and the government treats all religions equally. Democratic means we choose our government through elections, and republic means that our head of state, the president, is an elected person, not a king or queen. And it doesn't stop there. The preamble also gives us 4 big ideals to live by. Justice means everyone should be treated fairly without any discrimination. Liberty gives us the freedom to think and express ourselves. Equality means we are all equal in the eyes of the law. And fraternity means that all of us should live together in a spirit of brotherhood, like one big family. Now, here's a small but very important detail that often comes up in exams. The 2 words socialist and secular were not in the original preamble. They were added to it much later in 1976 through the 42nd Amendment. So, please remember that. Okay, everyone, we've gone through the entire chapter. Let's do a quick final revision to make sure all these important points are fresh in your mind for your exams. First, let's quickly go over the key definitions again, just to be sure. A constitution is the supreme law. Apartheid was a system of racial discrimination. The preamble is the introduction to the Constitution. And the Constituent Assembly was the body that wrote our Constitution. Got it? Good. And what about the important dates? Let's revise them. April 26, 1994 is when South Africa became a democracy. November 26, 1949 is when our Constitution was adopted. And January 26, 1950 is when it came into effect. These 3 dates are very important. So, if a question comes up in your exam like, why do we need a constitution? Here is a perfect short answer you can use. A constitution generates trust, it specifies and limits the government's power, it protects citizens' rights, and it expresses the aspirations of the people. This answer covers all the 4 functions we discussed. So as we finish, I want you to remember one thing. The Constitution isn't just a boring rule book, it's a living document that contains the values and hopes of our country. And so I'll leave you with a final thought. How do these values, like justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity, guide your life as a student and as a citizen of India? Think about it. Thank you for listening, and all the very best for your exam.